Hi, I'm Tori Hageman. In this step-by-step tutorial, I'll show you how I used a projector to figure out the scale and composition of this large hydrangea painting. I'll show you how I developed a color palette that guaranteed great color harmony. I'll show you that all-important block-in stage, how to get great texture and depth in the flowers, how to paint stems so that they seem to have textured with dappled light. Speaking of dappled light, I'll even show you how I achieved that effect in the dirt. I have broken this tutorial into sections and bite-sized pieces that should work for the beginner or more advanced artist. Stay tuned. Welcome to my channel where I help you remove ceilings that keep you from being the best artist you can be. To use a projector, you'll need to do this at night or be in a space that can be made really dark. I'm using the Artograph projector, and I have the Super Prism lens that just gives great clarity. I really like this projector. I've tried a couple. This one loads from the top, meaning that I can just stand there with my hand underneath the lid and move that printed off photograph back and forth until I find just that right section that I want to paint. And it's really helpful in determining the scale of the painting. For example, am I going to paint that entire scene, or am I going to focus in on one part and really blow it up and make it dramatic? It's just helped me to get a great placement and a more interesting composition. It's just been such a helpful tool. I found a way to purchase this one with the upgraded lens as a package, which was so much cheaper than buying them separately. I'll include a link for that in the description box below if you want to check it out. For this painting, I'm using a Blick Premier cotton canvas. It's a 36 by 36. And even though this canvas has been pre-primed, I do like to go over it with another coat of gesso. Particularly for this painting, I decided to tint it since I was going to be using white flowers. I used just like a house painting brush or my Blick Essentials wide brush. Usually for my darks, I'll use a combination of Sap Green and Burnt Umber, but I had a couple of tubes of this golden artist color Sap Green hue, and I'd never really liked it because it's such a black green, but I thought that would be perfect to go ahead and get in a super dark area. So I just, any place in the photograph where there was dark vegetation in back, I was very loosey-goosey with it. I used a big wide brush. I just put it in super quick, just big strokes, just to fill in those dark areas. I've given this color palette a lot of thought, and this whole painting, how I want to do it, and I've decided that I want to go in and basically block in. I'm going to mix a green and white combined. I want these to look like a combination of green and white. You've seen those kind of hydrangeas. So if you'll notice, the underside is a little darker than the top. So I'm going to make this value, I'm going to make that top value, and I might make one value that's a little bit darker, but basically that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to block in all these flowers, and then I'm going to go back and put some texture in. But at this first stage, I'm just using those two values, just trying to block in. And I've really debated, do I want to do the flowers, use the same green as in the leaves? Do I want to use a yellow green here, a blue green here? And where I have landed after much thought is I'm going to use this chromium oxide green, and I'm going to try at first doing that with the leaves and with the flowers. And it may be that I'll add a little of this Naples Yellow into the leaves. I'll probably add a little ultramarine into that to get it a little darker. I have some burnt sienna for the stems. So I'm going to just mix these up. You know, if we see as we start laying it in that we don't like it, we can always change it. But I like to try from a position of color harmony. So I think using this as our main central point with the flowers and the leaves will help the painting to read well. So I'm going to take just, and you know, when you're doing, depending on the size of your painting, if you're doing a large painting, it's going to take some pretty large piles of paint. But I'm going to do some smaller ones right now just to kind of get a feel for, do I like that? Of course, for the flower, that is way too dark. So let's work with the flower first. Let's put just a touch of green and a lot of white. And let's see what we can get with that. See if we can land in a spot that we, gosh, that is reading really, really cool as I'm looking at the photograph. It's funny, the photograph printed off so much more of a yellow green than the photograph on my iPad is much bluer. But this still looks very, very cool. I'm not sure that I like that. Maybe even for the top of the flower, I don't know that I like it. I think it's, I don't know. I just don't like it. So this is just one of those points when you're working through the colors, but it's better to work through it now than, you know, halfway through your painting and realize the thing has gone off the rails. I'm just looking at my photograph again. I don't know, this just is reading kind of minty green to me. I'm not crazy about that. I'm going to add a touch of Naples to this pile. Let's just see what that does. If that can put a little warmth in there. I am a warm person color-wise. You know, I like the pinks and the oranges and the yellows more than... So that's a little warmer, a little nicer. I think it's still too dark to be the top of the flower. So let's add more white in. You don't necessarily have to mix this like cake batter. You can... So that's still a little dark. You don't want to go to your lightest light. You want to leave room to go up lighter for highlight. So let's try this for the lighter part, and let's do one that's darker for the underside. I'm just going to pull out of that pile, add a lot more white. And before I mix too much more paint, in case I decide to just jump ship entirely from the chromium oxide green, let's go over to the canvas. We'll drop that on. Let's work out some leaf colors. I do think this is nice for the leaves. Let me do a little bit darker down here with a little bit of the ultramarine. See if I can get a nice dark. See how that looks. I think that's nice. And maybe for a lighter leaf, let's add a lot more of the yellow. We're still using the chromium oxide as the base, even though we're going from blue greens to yellow greens. I think that is maybe too yellow. Let's add a little white to that, see what happens. At this stage, I don't want to go too light in the painting. I'm just trying to get things blocked in, and I want to leave room to put in some light highlight. So I think that's just reading a little too yellow. I'm going to drop a little more green in there. And I think that's nice. All right, I'm going to walk over to the canvas. I'm going to drop these in before I mix my... I'm going to be eventually putting in this golden open slow dry medium to give us more working time with these paints, but I don't want to put that in these piles yet because I'm not even sure we're going to be using these. So hold on, let's go over to the canvas, and I'm going to drop these in. I'm just going to take a palette knife and put these on the canvas, see if I like the color harmony, see if I feel like they're playing nicely before we go too much further. So I felt that I needed to just, for the hydrangea color, to add a tiny touch more of the Naples Yellow to both piles, which is what I've done here. And that has just shifted it barely from looking so blue turquoisey to a lighter green. And I've put a drop of that on the canvas. It reads much better. I'm very happy with it. So I think I'm going to keep the leaf string like it is. I'm now going to add a little Naples Yellow to both these piles to get them to shift just slightly. I'm not putting much. Let me let you see how much. So for that big pile, I'm going to put that much in there. This is just always just a little push and pull that you have to do, but gosh, it is time well spent to get your colors right, because wouldn't you hate to invest all that time in that painting and it turn out well, but the colors not be right? The color is just such an important part of the painting. Okay, I think we've got some good colors here to work with. I'm gonna mix in just a drop of this slow dry medium, well, a couple of drops into these larger piles. And then these piles are not going to be enough paint, but it's, you know, sometimes you just need to work on some small piles to figure out your color palette. So I'm going to use this Rosemary & Company Classic Long Flat. This is a size 10, and again, I like these brushes because they're so uneven at the top. Now this one's very worn. I've had it a long time, but it forces me to keep things soft. So I'm going in my lightest pile, which is my Chromium Oxide Green, a little Naples Yellow, and a lot of white. And I'm just going to block this in. I'm going to do big loose strokes. I'm going to go over these flowers later and put some texture in, but I'm not worried about that. I'm just trying to get a block in. So the top of the flower is going to be light, the bottom of the flower is going to be darker. We can always, when we get to it later, we can always make this darker in spots. You know, we can drop in something like that where we need to if we see a little dark patch in it. But for now, I'm just basically doing the top light and the bottom in that color, just getting it put in quickly. Looking at my reference now and then. Not going to be a slave to that. This photograph doesn't have real strong lights and shadows in it like I really like. I think that's such an important part of a painting. So I'm probably going to exaggerate that from the photograph anyway. So I don't want to be such a slave to the photograph as I'm blocking this in. You know, the photograph is a great reference, but it needs to read well as a painting. And as an early artist, I was such a slave to the photograph. It was pitiful. And that's one of several reasons why my paintings were so tight. And I don't want to have tight paintings anymore. And I don't want that for you either. I want you to be able to get a looser look. And this may not be your style. You may want to do something more tight. And there are many artists who do very beautiful, very detailed, almost photographic work. But for this painting, I'm trying intentionally to keep it loose. And I'm just showing you the methods that I used to help force me to keep something looser, since that's not my natural style. It's interesting right here. My brush wasn't clean. You see a nice value difference between these two. These two look very similar. That's okay, because we're going to go back over it. But that can happen when you don't clean your brush. Which I'm really not cleaning my brush in between. Some of these are going to be more in shadow with just a little light at the top. So you don't necessarily want to do these half and half. I think it's going to be more interesting. Particularly these ones that are closer to the ground are probably going to be more in shadow. You could go ahead and just use the shadow color for those primarily. See, I'm already running out of paint. A painting this size just takes a lot. But then you get the drama of having a big painting as your reward when you get through. Before I stop and remix, I'm going to go ahead and put, since I have some light left, I'm going to go ahead and put that in till I run out of paint. Big loose strokes, not fussing with it, I'm not dabbing. Lots of paint on my brush. And keep in mind, these are not perfect circles. These are a little oval, and each one is its own unique character, so you need to vary that. Okay, I'm about out of paint for the flower, so I'm going to have to stop and remix. Keep in mind as you're painting these, and you look back to your reference photo, these are not all facing forward. Some of them are facing out that way. Some of them are facing up. So that can make a real difference in the shadow color. So be sure and, you know, I was saying don't be a slave to the reference photo, but you do need to keep in mind the direction that things are going in. This is so much fun to use tons of paint and a big loose brush. If you've never tried it, and if that just looks too out of control, I just really encourage you that there's just a freedom to this and a joy and a delight to painting like this that I just didn't know for years. So I'm just dipping my brush into burnt sienna and burnt umber. I'm not even mixing them together. I'm just getting both on the brush. And I'm just loosely blocking that in. That's going to be the little mulch that's at the bottom of this bed. Picked up a little green in there, that's okay. Loose brush strokes. You don't want the brush strokes all going in the same direction. We are not painting a wall. We're getting some loose, expressive brush strokes. We'll probably be going over this again, but it's nice to have a good dark background. I'm even going to dip in a little of that ultramarine to get some real dark over here in this corner. Some real dark up in here. I realized I had missed a few blooms, so I'm going to go back in and put those in. After putting this in, I was very careful to wash my brush, and I changed my water completely because I don't want to contaminate my water or end up with muddy color. So let me drop these in real quick. Suggest getting back from your painting again. I'm going to put one more here, and I'm going to run it off the side of the canvas. So instead of looking at your photograph at this point, I would just look at the painting and say, as a painting, as a composition, does it read well? Do you want something else up in here? Do you want to have this trail off? Does this look full enough? Here we've got two of something. Do we need a little third just to keep it more interesting? It's just a time to make that evaluation. Like I say, I think I am going to have that one just run off. I like having something real dark down in here. I'll probably darken this up a lot. I like having this coming off. I think it might be nice to have one more small something up in here, kind of underlapping that one. Just kind of nice to have a little cluster going there. I like that there's some real small ones, and I like that there's some huge ones. These will definitely be the focus, but I think it's nice having some small ones. I'm going to put one more small one in right here where you're just going to see a little bit of it, just to give us some clusters. I think that looks a lot nice. I do like this little single one going off to the side. And I like this one, this big one up here. And I like that we've got all this drama, but then this will be more with the leaves. My light just went off. This is when it would be awfully nice to have a camera person who could zoom in for you and fix lights and that sort of thing. So I think that's pretty much it. And it's time to start putting in some leaves. And we're gonna use this string over here. If I run out of paint, I've got so much left from this, I may mix those in. So let's just start dropping in some leaves and see how we feel about the color. I'm going to wash my brush out again. I'm I'm dropping down one size with brush, and it's so painted over I can't tell, but the other brush was a 10, so this is probably an 8. I'm going into my darkest green, and I'm just gonna, oops, well, that looks a lot lighter, doesn't it? Mix a little blue into that. I'm mixing a little ultramarine into that just to darken that up a little bit. Notice I am just putting in big sweeping strokes. I am not fussing with this. There's some leaves going in different directions. But basically we've got a stem, a wood stem going right here. So I want it to look like those are coming off that stem. Do it in the fewer strokes you can do this in, the looser it's going to look. If you get in there with a little bitty brush, I'm just going to shake you. If you get in there with a little bitty brush, start dabbing that thing, trying to get that perfect, you're just going to lose the whole idea of this. I'm dipping in a little of that ultramarine. I'm not mixing it very much. I'm just, and I think your painting is going to be a lot more interesting if you have some strokes of paint that have different colors loosely mixed together. It's just a lot more interesting. Look, isn't that pretty, having both those colors there? So I encourage you just to play with that. Some of these leaves are going to go behind some flowers. Some will go in front of them. Try to give them a little bit different shape. Some will turn up, some are gonna turn down. When they do turn down and they're underneath something, you may want to just add a little more ultramarine just to get that a little bit darker. Again, we're not trying to put in tons of detail for these. We just want it to read like leaves. When they get down to the bottom of the bush, these leaves are super dark. You can add plenty of ultramarine to that. I'm just kind of popping these in here and there at this point. Just trying to kind of fill in some space. See, isn't that nice where it goes across a dark? And we're going to have more and more of that. We're going to put in some, this is my thought. We'll see when we get to it. But my thought is we're going to put in maybe, I don't know, 30 leaves or something real loose like this. And then we're going to go back in and we're just going to take a smaller brush and we're just going to put some little dots of color here and there to fill in the background. But we're not putting in 200 leaves on this. We're going to put in a few focal leaves and then we're just going to drop in some different dark greens in the background. So that's why, again, if you can keep these super loose, it's just, the painting's just going to read so much better. Just try to trust me for this one. Even if this doesn't feel right to you or it feels uncomfortable, you know, I get that. But trust the process. And you don't want to put every leaf the same size or the same amount of it showing. Like here you've got a full leaf, here you've got half of a leaf. There's less of this leaf showing than that leaf. The more that you can vary them, the more interesting it's going to look. So I'm going to put a few more leaves down in this dark area. I'm not worried about how uneven that looks. I like the looseness of that. I'm going to darken this up one more time, get a little bit super dark down in here. I do think it's important to look at your reference just to see how these leaves go and how they're sometimes they're clustered together. Like there's a leaf underneath that's almost black. It's so dark. I'm gonna let that one just get super dark, and we'll put a dark shadow under that one. So now we've got these leaves that look connected, and I'm gonna have a stalk running up through there. It might help you mentally to go ahead and put your stalks in so you can kind of see where things are supposed to connect to. I accidentally pulled some of that brown into that green. I think that's okay too. You're gonna have some accidents with your paints. So I'm going to put a few more dark ones in right through here, but then it's going to be time for us to get to our lighter greens. I'll put a few more happening in here. And it's good to have a few that look like they're connected, that they're related, that they're coming off that same stalk. I'm going to put a few up in here just to kind of fill in that space. We don't want all this just being background. We want it to definitely read like there are plenty of leaves back in here and have some bigger spaces for that. It's always good to get back. I feel like we need something coming out from underneath here. I'm out of my dark paint, so I'm going to have to mix a little more of these greens, and then we'll get back. Then we're going to start getting lighter as we move up. Isn't this fun? Getting back and looking at this, I feel, and looking at my photo again, I feel like I need some more darks around these heads. So the thing that drew me to this photograph were the big sections that were just super dark, where you could tell you were really looking back through that bush. So I'm going to go in and add more darks to this, and then we're going to go over those darks with the leaves. But I want to have a good solid background and back. So I didn't think I was going to do that, but now that I'm kind of living with it, particularly from this point down, I'm not going to do it up in here, but from this point down, I want to make sure, like through here, that that's just super dark. I'm going to go back to the same kind of blacky sap green. I'm not going to put any slow dry medium in it. I'm going to let it dry, and then we'll go back over with our leaves, maybe after lunch. I just wanted to throw out this thought as I was painting this in. Just as it's important that you have these spaces, that they're interesting, that they're clustered, your negative space is important as well. So you want to make sure that you're having an interesting negative space. So that's just a thought to put in your mind as you get back and look at your painting. This is going to be a stalk coming down, but just to make sure. And see, just getting more darks in, I think, already, and then as the lighter leaves go on top of it, it's just going to be great. I have found so many times with my paintings, if I'll really get the dark super dark and have plenty of real lights and have lots of contrast, it just makes the painting so much more interesting. I'm excited. So let me show you what I've done. So I've added some more blooms in. These three were about the same size, which I didn't like, so I've made this one much larger going in front of these. I don't like this situation. I don't like these three that are just so, they're too much the same size. They're equally spread apart. So I'm going to make this very top one much larger. I like that it's coming off. I'm going to make it go in front of that one. I'm going to give it a real dark center. And and let it have a real highlight around the edge. I'm just going to make it a little more dramatic. And we can always put some leaves over these as well. I might have this one go off the canvas. I just think that's a little more interesting than having everything like there's a frame around it. I think that helps a lot, having something get off. So I think that's it, unless I put one more. I really like these, and I want these to be the focal point, and one way we can identify those as the focal point is putting more detail in these and less detail up in those. So while I have my paints out, I think I'm going to put one more real big one up in this corner, and we can always paint over it if it feels like it's just too much, but I like that. So that's an odd shape. I'll have to fix that, but one real big one with the light really catching it. So I've got kind of an odd shape there. I'll fix that with the leaves or whatever we're doing with the background. So just to let you hear kind of my thought process as I was working through that. Again, we'll fix that. Okay. I'm not sure, gosh, not sure I think about that. But again, as we go in and put in leaves, I can always carve into this. I can make these smaller. We can always go back in and add another bloom if we need to. Now I've got everything is going that way, which may be, I feel like maybe there needs to be something going straight. So I'm just going to add a line right through there. And we'll just hope that that reads correctly. No one's going to be counting your leaves or your stalks or making sure that everything's, you know, just right. So don't worry about that. Just all right, so what I'm going to do now, we've got all this space that needs to be filled in with something, and I'm going to mix up a variety of greens using the same pile that we have, and maybe introducing another, maybe adding ultramarine and cad yellow, making a lighter green out of that. And I'm just going to go in with this brush, and I'm going to go in and I'm just going to put some strokes here and there. For example, on top of this dark, I'm going to put a little stroke here and there that just shows that there's some vegetation back there, but it's very loose and undefined, but you just get the sense that there's something going on. I'm going to do that with the rest of this background. So it's going to take a while. I don't know that I'm going to try to film it all because it may take me an hour to do it, but I might take some pictures or some video, you know, midway through, and I'm just going to go in and just add in some marks and just vary them. I'm going to use this really soft brush, keep it loose. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm not clamping down on this brush like a pencil. I'm holding it like this. It's very loose. It's got a lot of wiggle. I don't have a lot of control over it, which is what I want. and I'm just dropping in just loose marks. So say a prayer. So I've been working on it, filling in the background. I just love where this is going. And I just got back from it and looked at it. And all along I've been thinking this is just going to be the green and the flowers. But now I'm starting to wonder about putting a little blue sky up in that right-hand corner. And so I'm thinking about it. I might continue filling in a little bit more of the green, and then I might get brave and put a little blue on there. If I decide to do that, I'll let you see it. So I wanted to show you a close-up of what was happening. So I'm still using this fairly large brush with this rough end. So I can't drop precise marks, let's see, down in here. All I can do is just fill in the best I can, and it's not staying within the lines. It's not, let me, I need to raise this a little bit. So there's some places where I can drop in a little bit darker paint so you can see that, where you can see that leaf. But you can see how loose this is forcing me. I can't get a precise line with this brush. So that's just the best I can do, but I really like the effect of this. It's super impressionistic, it's super loose, it's just lovely. Now I'm going to go back and reestablish these leaves, get some highlights and things. I'm going to definitely be working on the flowers. But you can see what's happening with this background by, you know, getting that something kind of in to outline it, and then I can drop in a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it's just loose, and it's just wonderful. I love it. It's a beautiful way to paint. But it's funny, it almost takes some control to be able to let go enough to do this, to let go of your little bitty brushes, let go of your brushes with the sharp edges to them, and to just allow yourself the freedom. I tell you though, once you get used to painting this way, I don't know that you'll ever go back. I don't know that I could ever go back. This is just way too much fun. But you just have to get used to some sloppy edges. Like that's just going to be a little messy. I can go back in and do those leaves. And I am going to go back and reestablish these stems, that sort of thing. But the messiness is part of what is keeping it loose. So I'm still thinking about this blue. I'll let you know. I have mixed in the tiniest amount of cobalt into a big pile of white, and I'm just going to lay some on there. I don't want to make a big blue statement, but I just want to see how that looks. I'm going to lay that in, and if it's too pale or if it looks weird, I'll do something else. So here we are on a different day. It is pouring rain outside. I hope that noise isn't, I hope it will lull you and it won't be distracting. But here's where the painting is. I've got a light blue up in that top right corner. I think I'm gonna leave that, but probably will put another coat. What I'm looking at now, so I'm ready to go in and put in some petals and a few of these main flowers. I'm not going to do it to all of them, or not in great detail, but I want a few of the bigger flowers like this one, and right in here, and right in here. I want these to be the main flowers, so I want to put more detail in there to draw your eye to those, and the ones up in the corner I'll probably put less detail. And I've been thinking about how I'm going to do that, but I think before I do that, I want to go back in and rework these leaves a little bit. I like the leaves down in the bottom, how they're a little more irregular and how they're not exactly connected. There's a little distance between there, where up in here I did them exactly across from each other, and I don't think I like that as much. I also want to put a little veining in the leaves. So I'm going to go back and just rework those leaves a little bit. Once I get finished with that, I'm going to go back in and just drop a little green, little bits of things here and there. I'm going to go over these stems one more time and put some lights and darks in those to give those a little texture and the sense that light is hitting some and some are in shadow. Then we're going to go back and do our flowers. And when I do that, I'll try to put the camera right up close so you can watch that very closely. I took some more cobalt and white and I made it a little deeper. And I went back over this sky, which, oh, I just loved it. It made such a big difference. And if you'll recall, this was all just solid green with leaves. And I just put in some sky holes there. And as you're putting in sky holes, those spaces need to look right. Like I think this space right here looks like an udder on a cow or something. I think that's kind of odd. So I'm probably going to go back in and I'll just put some greenery over that. You know, it's an easy thing to fix, but it really opened that up. I'm just super pleased with that. So I've gone over the leaves a little bit. I've just put a little more dimension. I've got several layers of green. So you don't want just one layer of green on your leaf. You want 2 or 3 or 4. Okay, I've been debating about this a little bit. I'm going to go to this the way I've been complaining about. Don't use a straight brush, but I'm going to try this straight brush because I think it's going to give us more that edge of the petal. This is the Princeton Summit Bright. It's a 6100, and I'll show you what I did. So I added more Naples Yellow to this and more white, which is what I'm going to do primarily, but then I made an even lighter pile. That's why you don't want to start out too white because you have no place to go. I want these flowers at the top to be really white, maybe even whiter than that. So I've got 2 values there. So let's just try. We can always wipe it off. Let's just see. I think that's pretty. I think the other was just too small and looked a little too dabby. So I think that's pretty. I think that touch of yellow in it just gives it a little bit of a glow. Just trying to keep that going in the right direction, going around in a circle. And there are places when you look at these, they're not perfectly round. There are some places that really kind of jump up. Not overthinking it, but I am trying to get these going in the right direction. I've got a fair amount of paint on this brush. I like this edge that I'm getting there. I'm going to drop down. I think this next color is going to be, not sure how I'm going to feel about that. We don't want to cover up all of our dark underside. I think I'm going to try mixing some of this lighter and the green together, kind of get something in the middle. You need to get enough paint on your brush so you can get some good coverage on these outside spaces. I feel like I'm kind of losing my darks, so now I'm going to drop back into this. I'm going to get away from this, and it's going to look great or it's going to look strange. I'm just not sure. Let me just do that right now and let's see what happens. We can always go back in and drop in some green. Let me get back again, see how that looks. I think that looks pretty good. I like the texture of this a lot. So let's try this one. Again, I'm just trying to vary that edge quite a bit. And then this one starts getting pretty green pretty soon. And then it gets very green. I'm using that same color on my brush, but I'm just adding some of the pure green in there as well. I'm going to go back in. I don't want just a solid line, so I'm going to drop a few petals here and there over that, just to break that up. And in the photograph, when you look, there are certain petals that are catching the light throughout here. A little too perky. Not really sure what to do about that. I think it needs some more of the light dropped back in. Maybe some bigger, thicker strokes here and there. I'm a little hesitant. I don't know if you can see these clumps of paint. I'm a little hesitant to leave that in case I feel like I need to go back and paint over it. I don't want to have all those ridges underneath, but I think I'm going to leave it. So let's try this next one. I like getting some light up over the dark, so it's important to overlap. So remember to keep the right direction going. Try not to fuss with it too much. I just feel like the more I keep messing with it, the more likely it is to overwork it. Here's a flower that I felt like it was getting too white and all the green had gotten too covered up. So I just went in and dropped in some of the dark green. And now I'm going to go back over it one more time with the lighter and try to just trying to be mindful of those brush strokes, kind of looking at my reference photo, trying to leave plenty of that green and that shadow in there. There's some places around these edges where I didn't have enough paint, it wasn't thick enough, so oops, that might be a little too. So I have gone back in with some of those and kind of reestablished those just to give a cleaner, nicer edge. Going to that whiter, lighter value on some of these at the top where they're really catching. And that's why, again, you don't want to use much of that white, you got to save it to the very, very end. Took a little drama going. I must say, getting these flowers to look like they're going in the right direction so it doesn't look like they're all, you know, pointing this way or that way, but trying to be very intentional to get them to look like they're going in different directions has been a bit challenging. So I'm kind of going back to my reference photograph and just making sure that I'm looking at that occasionally. Because it's really not, when I look at how the petals are going, it's really not the way I think it would be. And I look at my reference photo and it's this is just real loosey-goose. Trying to make sure I'm getting some interesting uneven edges up here. Trying not to cover up all my green. Looking at the photo, you know, there's this tendency to want to put big strokes, but in the photo, if you use the corner of your brush, there are a number of places where there's just a little bit of light catching the corner of a petal, which has a nice look to it. And you see from those little marks that there is a kind of a circular thing going on, but it's just little marks. So let's see how those read. It's important to not have the green going over top of the white. That's where I'm finding it's looking odd. If I can keep the white going over the green, somehow that just reads so much better. It's important to overlap things. Be real careful where your petals meet these dark edges. That's just a great place to get something interesting. So I'm not going to try to film this all because it's probably going to take me hours to do this. I'm just kind of messing with and experimenting and going in and just adding until I can get it to look right. Going back to my reference photo, if you get too much white in and you get too much green, it's acrylic. You can just go back in. There's a big add some green in and then start over and just, you know, leave a little space here and there. One of the easiest things to do in your painting with the greatest impact is to have dappled light. To achieve that on the stems, I took my straight edge brush and dipped it into burnt umber, the dark brown, and I then drew a line straight down the shadow side of the stem. On the side that the light is hitting, I use that same straight brush to run some Naples Yellow in the brightest spots and went down to burnt Sienna in the areas not as bright. A key trick is to run the dark brown across the stem to really bump up that dappled effect. I also took the corner of my brush, dipped in burnt umber, and added some small bumps to the edge of the stems and in the center of the stem to give it a great textured woody effect. I used the same three colors, Naples Yellow, burnt Sienna, and burnt umber, to get the dappled light effect in the mulch area as well. I used a large, rough brush and dipped into the paints, particularly the Naples and burnt sienna. I would then scrub those colors in, turning my brush and varying the strokes. It was so easy to do, and what a great effect. I hope if this painting has been a fun process for you, I'd love for you to hit that like button and hit subscribe. And if you'll hit the notification bell, you'll be sure to know the next time I put a painting out, which hopefully won't be too long. Thanks a lot. God bless you.